My daughter Claire's graduation dinner was supposed to be the night she finally felt seen. 4 years of nursing school, 2 part-time jobs, a thesis she rewrote 3 times, all of it leading to one quiet, perfect evening at a private table at Canoe, the most celebrated restaurant in downtown Toronto, 41 floors above the harbor. I had saved for 6 months for that reservation. I had called ahead to arrange a custom dessert plate with her name piped in chocolate. I had pressed my good blazer the night before and told her to wear something she loved. Instead, it turned into the night my brother-in-law looked me straight across the white linen tablecloth, smiled his sharpest smile, and informed me I would be covering dinner for 11 people I had never met. I am a paralegal at a mid-sized firm in Mississauga. I have spent the last 9 years reading contracts that other people signed without understanding, untangling messes that could have been avoided with one careful conversation. I draft ironclad agreements before disagreements have a chance to breathe. I am calm under pressure. I am methodical. I do not panic. But the most exhausting case I have ever had to manage was not a file on my desk. It was my 38-year-old brother-in-law, Derek. Derek is the kind of man who walks into a room and immediately calculates what everyone in it owes him. He dresses well. He talks confidently. He drops the names of restaurants, golf courses, and investment funds into every conversation like punctuation. But strip away the performance and what you find underneath is a man who has not paid his own way in years. He borrowed $4,000 from my husband 18 months ago for what he called a short-term cash flow issue. He has never mentioned it since. When my mother-in-law turned 70, Derek organized the party, chose the catered menu, ordered the custom cake, invited 40 people, and then presented my husband with half the bill the morning of the event, standing in our kitchen with his coat already on, like a contractor dropping off an invoice on his way to the next job. My husband, Marcus, is the kind of man who absorbs these things quietly. He grew up in a family where Derek was always the charming one, the one with the big ideas, the one who got away with things because he made everyone laugh on the way out the door. Marcus has spent his entire adult life quietly covering the gaps Derek leaves behind. He does not see it as enabling. He sees it as loyalty. I see it as a pattern. Claire is our daughter. She is 23 years old. She is brilliant and exhausted, and she earned every single credit on her transcript the hard way. She is not Derek's daughter. She is not Derek's project, or his audience, or his networking opportunity. Her graduation dinner was not a venue for him to perform in. He showed up anyway. I did not know he was coming until I looked up from the breadbasket and saw him walking through the dining room with his wife, my sister-in-law Sandra, and 9 other people colleagues of his. Apparently, a mix of couples and single friends, all laughing loudly, all already halfway through what smelled like a pre-dinner somewhere else. He was wearing his expensive watch. He was gesturing broadly at the room like he owned it. He spotted me, spread his arms wide, and said, loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear, that he hoped I had reserved enough space, because the whole crew was starving. I looked at Claire. She was still smiling, the way she always smiles when she is deciding whether something is worth reacting to, this careful, measured smile. She has been practicing since she was old enough to understand what Derek does to a room. He pulled chairs from nearby tables without asking the staff. He waved at the sommelier like they were old friends. He picked up the menu, made a long appreciative sound, and said, loud enough for his entire group to hear, that his sister-in-law had excellent taste and an even more excellent credit limit. Everyone laughed. I set down my water glass. My mother-in-law, Diane, had been sitting at the far end of our original table, the one I had arranged for 7 people, Marcus, Claire, me, my parents, and Diane herself. She caught my eye the moment Derek sat down. She looked the way she always looks when Derek arrives, uninvited to something, that particular combination of relief that he is here, and apology that she cannot quite say out loud. She excused herself quietly, followed me to the hallway near the coat check, and touched my arm. She told me Derek had mentioned the dinner to her last week. She told me she did not think he would actually come. She told me he had been going through a hard time lately, that the commercial real estate deal he had been building for 2 years had collapsed in the spring, and he was restructuring things. She used the word restructuring. I have been a paralegal long enough to know what restructuring usually means. She asked me, with her hand still on my arm, whether I could just let tonight be a good night, whether I could put the dinner on my card and deal with it later, for Claire's sake. Whether I could let Derek have his moment because it would mean a lot to Diane to have everyone together. I looked at her for a long moment. I thought about the $4,000 still sitting on our kitchen table as a line item in a spreadsheet I update every few months. I thought about my mother's 70th birthday that Derek missed because he was in Whistler. I thought about Claire's face when she saw him walk in that careful, measured smile. I told Diane I understood. I told her to go back to the table. Then I walked to the host stand and asked for the manager. Canoe is not a casual restaurant. It is the kind of place that has a guest relations manager named Priya who wears a headset and moves through the room with the quiet efficiency of someone who has handled every possible version of a difficult evening. I have dined here twice before, Both times for firm client events. Both times billed through our corporate account. Priya recognized me. I kept my voice low, and my explanation brief. I told her our original reservation was for 7. I told her the additional guests at the table were not part of our booking. I told her I needed the table formally split into 2 separate reservations, 2 separate checks, effective immediately our original 7-on-1, and the walk-ins on another. I told her, very clearly, that nothing ordered by the additional guests was to be charged to my account or my husband's name under any circumstances. Priya did not blink. She nodded once, made a note on her tablet, and said she would have it arranged within the next few minutes without disrupting the table. I walked back to my seat. Derek was already ordering. He had taken it upon himself to request 2 bottles of wine for the table, both from the top third of the list, and was in the middle of explaining to the sommelier why he preferred a specific vineyard in Niagara-on-the-Lake that he had visited once 4 years ago. Sandra was showing photos on her phone to the woman beside her. None of Derek's guests had looked at Claire once. Our daughter was talking to my mother about her first clinical placement. She was using her hands when she spoke, the way she always does when she is genuinely excited about something. My father was leaning forward listening. For a small, clean moment, it was exactly the evening I had planned. Then Derek tapped the table with 2 fingers in my direction and said, still talking to the sommelier but aimed at me, that we should probably do a round of the Dungeness crab to start. And did I want him to just tell them to put it all on one tab to keep things simple? I said, no, we have separate checks tonight. He laughed. He said something to the sommelier about how accountants never know how to have fun at dinner. He is aware I am not an accountant. He has always been aware. The sommelier looked briefly at me. I gave a very small nod. He understood. The evening ran in 2 parallel tracks after that. On our end of the table, we ordered carefully and well. Claire had the Ontario lamb. My parents shared the mushroom risotto. Marcus ordered the halibut. I had the salmon. We talked about Claire's plans, about her first shift at St. Michael's Hospital in the fall, about the apartment she was looking at near Bloor and Dufferin. It was the dinner I had spent 6 months imagining. On Derek's end, things moved differently. The 2 bottles of wine disappeared quickly. A third was ordered. The crab came out, and then a seafood tower, and Derek made a production of it, lifting pieces and passing them around and narrating the textures like a man performing for people he was trying to impress. His guests were loud and loose and having a genuinely good time on what they believed was someone else's tab. At 9:45, the server placed 2 separate leather folders on the table. Ours went to Marcus. I watched him glance at it, nod, and reach for his card without drama. Derek's folder landed in front of him, with the particular quiet authority of a document that has been waiting all evening to be opened. He opened it. I was not watching directly. I was listening to my mother finish a story. But I noticed the shift in his posture before I turned to look. The way his shoulders changed. The way he closed the folder and opened it again, as if the number might be different the second time. It was not different the second time. He looked up the table at me. There was a long pause. He said very carefully that there had been some kind of mistake. That we were together. That it was one table. I said, we made separate reservations when you arrived. Everything on your side is itemized. It's accurate. He said my name once, flatly, the way he says it when he is recalculating. I turned back to my mother's story. What happened next? I did not watch in real time. Marcus told me later. And the summary version is this. Derek's card was declined. Sandra's card covered part of it. Derek spent approximately 20 minutes attempting to reach someone on his phone, who did not pick up. At some point, he walked to the host stand and had a low, tightly controlled conversation with Priya, who listened with professional patience and then explained, quietly and clearly, that the reservation had been entered as 2 separate parties, and the restaurant had no mechanism to retroactively merge accounts once orders had been processed. This is true. I know it is true because I confirmed it with Priya before I sat back down. Derek and Sandra covered the remaining balance with a combination of a second card, and what I later heard was a request to split the remaining amount across 3 separate cards belonging to 2 of his guests. I don't know how much each person paid. I know it was over $800 per couple at the table. His guests' energy changed visibly after the folder arrived. 2 of the couples left almost immediately after paying, with the kind of brisk warmth that means they are never attending one of his dinners again. One woman in a green dress someone I had never seen before passed our end of the table on her way out and paused to tell Claire that her program sounded incredible and that she hoped she loved every minute of her career. It was the kindest thing anyone from Derek's side of the table said to my daughter all night. We stayed for dessert. The restaurant brought out the custom plate I had arranged, white chocolate letters, Claire's name in careful script, a single candle. She covered her face with both hands when she saw it. My father took a photo. It is the only photo from that evening that I have printed and framed. Derek did not stay for dessert. He stopped beside my chair on his way out. He did not crouch down or lower his voice particularly. He said that what I had done was small, that it was a bad look. That family does not do this to family. I said, family shows up invited. He left. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. Because people like Derek do not process consequences quietly. They process them by escalating, and they escalate in the direction of whoever they believe will absorb the damage. 3 days later, my mother-in-law called Marcus. She had been on the phone with Derek. She told Marcus that Derek was talking about restructuring the arrangement around the money they had all agreed to contribute to Diane's future care. A loose, informal plan the family had discussed over the years. Nothing signed. Nothing documented. Just the kind of verbal agreement that families make, and then interpret differently when it stops being convenient. Derek, apparently, was suggesting that Marcus's share would need to increase to compensate for what he was calling a deliberate act of financial humiliation in front of his professional network. Marcus listened to the entire call. He thanked his mother. He hung up. Then he walked into our kitchen, sat down across from me, and asked me to pull up the spreadsheet. I opened it. The $4,000 was still there. Line 7. 18 months outstanding. No payment schedule ever established. No written agreement. Below it, $2,300 from the birthday party. Below that, a smaller amount, $460 from a hockey game Marcus had covered for Derek 2 years ago, that Derek had called a loan. Marcus looked at the total for a long moment. He asked me what I thought we should do. I told him I thought we should send a letter. I drafted it myself. It took me 40 minutes. It was written on firm letterhead, not as a legal document. I want to be precise about that. It was not a legal demand, but it was formatted with the discipline of one. It itemized each outstanding amount, the date, the context, and the total. It referenced the verbal discussion about Diane's care arrangements, and noted that any modification to Marcus's contributions would need to be established in a written agreement signed by all parties. It closed with a payment request and a 30-day response window. I sent it by registered mail and by email with read receipt. Derek's response arrived 11 days later, through Sandra, not through Derek himself, which told me everything I needed to know about where he actually stood. Sandra called Marcus, not me. She told him Derek was incredibly hurt, that the letter was aggressive and unnecessary, that this was not how family handled things. Marcus said, "The letter is how we handle things now." She hung up. The 30 days passed. No payment came. I followed up with a second letter. This one was shorter. It referenced the first. It included a note that further steps were available if the debt remained unresolved. On day 41, a certified check arrived in our mailbox. Not for the full amount, it was short by about $900, which I assume is the number Derek landed on when he calculated what he could pay without fully conceding. I deposited it. I updated the spreadsheet. I drafted a short acknowledgement noting the partial payment and the remaining balance, sent it the same way as the first 2 letters. The remaining balance came 4 months later. No note, no explanation. Just a check in an envelope with Derek's name on the return address. I deposited it on a Thursday morning before work. The total that came back to us over those months sits now in a dedicated savings account. We used part of it to top up Claire's resp for the last time before she aged out. The rest is sitting there, quiet and patient, waiting for whatever she needs next, a move, a licensing exam, a month off when the work gets heavy. Diane still calls on Sundays. Marcus still answers. She does not mention Derek much. When she does, she speaks carefully, the way someone speaks about a part of the house they have decided not to go into anymore. I do not bring it up. Derek has not spoken to me directly since the night of the dinner. I have not found this to be a loss. I want to be honest with you about something, because I know what some of you are thinking. You are thinking, why did it take so long? Why did Marcus keep covering for him? Why did it take a graduation dinner and a public snub of your own daughter to finally send a letter? Here is the honest answer. Because families like ours are built on the unspoken agreement that keeping the peace is more important than keeping score. Every time you let something go, you are not being generous. You are teaching the other person that the cost of bad behavior is 0. Derek did not become Derek overnight. He became Derek because for years, every single person around him made it cheaper to take than to give back. I am not angry at Marcus for absorbing things. I understand why he did. I am not even angry at Diane. I understand what it costs a mother to stop protecting a child, even when that child is 38 years old and causing damage. What I know now, that I did not know before, is this. You do not fix these dynamics by being more patient. You fix them by changing the price. Separate checks is not a punishment. It is a price correction. When you stop subsidizing someone else's performance, you are not being cruel. You are being accurate. There are 3 things I would tell anyone standing where I was standing, 6 months before that dinner, watching the spreadsheet grow and telling yourself it will sort itself out eventually. The first is this. Verbal agreements in families are not agreements. They are wishful thinking with witnesses. If it matters, write it down. If they refuse to write it down, that refusal is information. The second is this. The moment someone uses your silence as a budget line, the invoice has already been issued. You are just choosing whether to dispute it. The third is this. Protecting your daughter's graduation dinner is not petty. It is not small. It is not a bad look. It is the most accurate possible expression of what you value and what you will not fund. Claire started her first shift at Street Michael's 2 weeks ago. She texted me after from the break room at 11:30 at night. A photo of her in her scrubs, a terrible vending machine coffee in her hand, and the biggest, most exhausted, most genuine smile I have seen on her face in years. I screenshot it and set it as my lock screen. That is the whole story. Not the dinner, not the letters, not the check. That photo is the whole story. Everything else was just logistics. If you are out there quietly updating a spreadsheet and telling yourself it is not worth the disruption, I want you to hear this. The disruption was always coming. You are just deciding whether it happens on your terms or theirs. Separate the checks. Let them handle their own tab. And put whatever you save toward the people who actually earned it. If this story landed somewhere true for you, hit subscribe. I'm here every week. And drop your story in the comments. I read every single one.